The floor vibrates before the train arrives. That is the first thing you learn on this commute, if you do it long enough. Not the sound, not the headlights appearing around the curve, the floor. A low tremor that starts somewhere under the tiles and moves up through the soles of your shoes about 15 seconds before you can hear anything. 41 minutes door to door. 11 months. I had learned this commute the way you learn to drive a road without looking at it, not with my mind, just with my body. It is 8:14 on the Thursday morning. I am standing on the first transfer platform, phone up, thumb not moving on the screen, and the floor is beginning to vibrate. To my left, maybe 8 feet away, a man is standing in the spot he always stands in. He has a dark green canvas tote bag with a broken left strap repaired with a carabiner clip, and I know this because I have been not looking at him for 3 weeks. I know the carabiner by the way it catches the platform light, a small flash of silver in the periphery, and then I know where he is without having to look. My thumb is still not moving. I am holding my phone at exactly the angle that makes it clear I am looking at something, that I am occupied, that I am not available for eye contact, and I have been perfecting this angle for 21 commute days. The train arrives. I board through the third door of the second car, which is where I always board because it aligns with the exit stairs at my office stop. I have been boarding through the third door of the second car for 11 months. I did not think about it until 6 weeks ago. He boards 2 doors down. He always boards 2 doors down. I look at my phone the whole way in. Here is what I can tell you that morning. I have reorganized my entire morning routine around a man I have never spoken to. I allow an extra 4 minutes before I leave my apartment so I can board the earlier segment of the transfer platform rather than the one nearest the stairs. I check the time 3 times on the 4 blocks between the final exit and my office building, and what I am checking for is not the time. And I have begun to understand, standing on that platform with the floor vibrating under my feet, that I have been treating this as something I am managing rather than something I am enduring, and that those are not the same thing. I want to tell you, I knew right from the beginning that something was off. I didn't. That is the thing. It built so slowly I almost did not notice it happening. Let me go back. 14 months ago, I moved to the city for a job. Junior Urban Planner, City Development Office. My specialty is movement pattern analysis. How people move through urban space. Where the flows are, what the blockages are, what the gaps between intended design and actual human behavior look like. I notice when someone's movement pattern does not fit the space they are in. I do this professionally, and then I go home and do it by accident at the grocery store, and in the coffee shop, and on the subway platform, because that is the kind of thing that once you can do, you cannot stop doing. The city was new to me. The job was good. I had colleagues I liked and a friend who lived 40 minutes away on a different line, and my mother called on Sundays, and I kept meaning to build more of a life here than that, but it kept not being the right week, and then it had been 14 months, and I had a commute I knew with my body, and an order at the coffee shop 3 blocks from my office that the counter person started making when she saw me come through the door, and I had not built much more than that. It was fine. It was going to be fine. I had a performance review in 8 weeks that I had been working toward for most of those 14 months, and once that was done, I would start doing the things you do to actually live somewhere rather than just working there. That was the plan. The coffee shop had a counter seat by the window that faced the street, and I sat there most mornings for 20 minutes before work with a laptop open. And I want to describe it to you so you understand what normal felt like before it stopped feeling that way. The sound the espresso machine made when it pressurized, a high-pitched hiss that happened twice before my order appeared on the counter. The way the street through the window looked different before the city filled up. Slower. The people on the sidewalk more deliberate. The smell of it, which was coffee and something slightly burnt from the oven in the back, and cold air from the door opening every few minutes. 20 minutes, same seat, 8 months running. I am telling you this so you understand that I was a person with routines, and I trusted my routines, and I had not yet learned what it feels like when someone else learns them too. The job. My manager's name was Patricia, and she was precise and fair and slightly difficult to read, which I respected, even when it was inconvenient. 11 months earlier, she had passed me over for a promotion I had applied for, And in my feedback, she had used the words visibility and consistency of output. And I had spent the following 3 months understanding what those words meant inside that specific office, and then building both of them deliberately. I had a review coming in 8 weeks, $14,000 more annually, and a title change that would move me to a different category of project. I had been building toward it for almost a year. I could not afford to be distracted. And more specifically, I could not afford to be seen as someone who was distracted or unstable, or the kind of person who made complaints that turned out to be nothing. I want you to hold that, the specific weight of it. I'll come back to it. The first time I noticed him, I did not notice him. That is the most accurate way I can describe it. It was week 3 of what I would later be able to tell you was an 8-week span. But at week 3, I did not know there was a span. It was a Tuesday morning, 8/11, first transfer platform. I had a coffee in one hand and my badge in the other, because I always forgot to get it out before the building scanner, and so I had started getting it out at the train instead. Stupid habit. I was looking at the badge, and then I looked up, because I always look up when the floor starts vibrating. And he was there. Dark green bag, carabiner. Face that I clocked the way I clock faces. Not with a decision, just as data. He was standing at the far end of the platform from the stairs, which is where I always stood, and he was looking at the track. I got on the train. I did not think about it again until Thursday of that week, when he was there again. Same spot, same bag. This time, I noticed the carabiner first. Small flash of metal near the strap, and then the bag, and then the face. And I had the brief thought that I had seen him before, and then the train came and I got on it. The thing is, I notice commuter patterns. I notice them the way a carpenter notices how a door hangs, not as a conscious act, just as a thing I do because of what my brain was trained to do. Consistent platform positioning, consistent boarding behavior, consistent timing. These are data points to me before they are anything else. So when I noticed him a third time on Friday, same spot, same bag, I filed it the way I filed professional data. Repeat commuter, consistent behavior, no significance. He had a job near his station and a job near mine, same as me. The city has 8 million people, and the same 40,000 of them take the same trains every day. I had a very organized mental filing system for reasons not to worry. I filed it under same job, same commute, coincidences happen. I got on the train. Week 4 was when I started the note. I want to be clear that I did not start the note because I was worried. I started the note because I am someone who keeps notes on patterns when I notice them, and I was in the middle of a project at work that required me to track frequency data for pedestrian flow along a specific corridor. And my brain, which cannot always distinguish between professional observation and personal experience, started doing the same thing it always does with a pattern it keeps seeing. The note was on my phone, a plain text document titled Nothing, because I had not decided it was anything yet. First entry, Tuesday, October 8th, 8:11 a.m., T1 platform, green bag, left side carabiner, far end from stairs. I added Thursday and Friday from memory. I went to work and sat in a meeting about zoning revision timelines and looked at my laptop screen and thought about nothing except the meeting. That is what I need you to understand about this period. I was still thinking in single entries, one at a time, each one going into the file as a data point, and then me closing the file and going on with my day. It was week 4, and I had 4 entries and they looked like nothing. On Wednesday of week 5, he was not on the train. I did not notice this until I was at my office, taking my coat off, and I thought, he was not there this morning. And then I thought, you are counting absences now. You have noticed that he was not present. I stood at my desk with my coat in my hands and had a full 30-second conversation with myself about the difference between noticing something professionally and becoming fixated on a stranger. And I concluded that I was on the wrong side of the line, and I went to my desk and worked for 8 hours and did not think about it again. I thought about it again at 6 p.m. on the walk back to the station. There were 4 blocks between my office building and the subway entrance, and they went past a small commercial strip, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a Thai place I had been meaning to try for 6 months. I was on my phone because I was reading notes for the pedestrian project and walking at the same time, which was something I did more than I should have. And I almost walked into a man coming out of the pharmacy, and when I stepped to the right to let him past, I looked up and he was across the street. Different side, same direction, green bag, carabiner catching the late afternoon light, walking at the same pace I was walking. I did not break stride. I kept walking. I moved slightly toward the building line and away from the curb. He did not look at me. He did not change pace. He went into the station entrance on his side, and I went in on mine, and we were on the same platform 60 seconds later, and he was in his spot, and I was in mine, and the train came, and we both got on it. I went home and added to the note. Then I made tea and sat at my kitchen table and looked at the wall for a while. The thing about seeing him on that street was not the seeing. It was the calculation. The immediate, automatic, involuntary calculation. He lives near my station, or he lived near whatever station he had gotten on at, and he works near my office, or he was near my office for some other reason. Same origin point, same destination zone. Possible. Perfectly possible. The city is full of people who take the same routes for unconnected reasons, and the fact that my brain had immediately started performing this calculation was a function of my profession and my noticing habit, and not evidence of anything except that I had too much data in my head about pedestrian movement patterns. I went to bed. I did not sleep particularly well. Week 6, I started noting his absence days as well as his presence days. I did not examine this decision very closely. I just noticed that I was doing it and continued. Here is what the note looked like by the end of week 6, if you had looked at any single entry. Meaningless. A time, a platform, a direction of gaze, a brief description of where he was standing relative to the stairs. But I had 21 entries, and something I know professionally, something I get paid to know, is that the signal is almost never in a single entry. The signal is in the sequence. The gaps and the patterns and the spacing and the frequency together make a shape that no individual data point contains. 21 entries, 17 appearances out of 21 commute days, 2 days where I had noted his absence, 2 days that had been outside my typical commute window, 1 where I had left late for a morning meeting at a different building, 1 where I had worked from home. The days I was not in my usual place, he was not on the platform. I sat with that for a long time. Then I filed it under coincidence because I could not establish that he had any way to know my schedule, and because I had 2 data points, and 2 data points are not a pattern. They are noise, and I know the difference. I know the difference. I moved the note to a folder on my phone labeled Expenses because I wanted to be able to open it without seeing the title and thinking about what I was doing. Then I went to work and spent 4 hours on a pedestrian corridor analysis and wrote a memo about foot traffic density at rush hour and thought about nothing except the memo. The second anomaly, I called it that to myself eventually, was week 7. A Wednesday. He was not on the morning train, and I clocked this absence the way I was now clocking absences, automatically, with the part of my brain I had not been able to turn off, and I spent the commute reading an article about zoning law on my phone, and I went to the coffee shop and sat at the counter seat and opened my laptop, and I did not open the note. I went to work. I had a good day. I contributed something useful in a project meeting, and Patricia said, without looking up from her laptop, "Good point." And I went back to my desk feeling fine. That evening, on the 4 blocks between the office and the station, a woman was walking her dog ahead of me, one of those small, solid dogs that moves like it is very committed to being somewhere. And I was behind her and enjoying the brief comedy of the dog's momentum versus her leash management. And then I moved past her and looked up to navigate around a delivery cart on the sidewalk, and he was there. Different side of the street, same direction, green bag, carabiner. I did not look away. I crossed to the other side, wide angle, using the delivery cart as an excuse to shift, and then I was on the opposite sidewalk, and he was on his original side, and I walked to the subway entrance without looking back. I moved to the other side of the street, and then I had a whole conversation with myself on the way home about how that was a completely normal thing to do and meant nothing. I had that conversation a lot. That evening, I scrolled through the note from the beginning. I had not read it in sequence before, I had only added to it. Reading it from the top, I saw what I had not seen, adding one entry at a time. I saw the shape. 17 appearances out of 21 commute days. 2 absences on days I had deviated from my schedule. An evening presence, twice now, on the commercial block between my office and the station. As a list, the entries were meaningless. In sequence, with the gaps marked, they were a pattern I would flag immediately in any dataset I was paid to analyze. I know how this sounds. I knew how it sounded when I was living it. That is the thing about this kind of thing. It sounds like nothing. The nothing is the point. There is a man who takes the same train as me. That is the entirety of what I could state as a fact. Everything else was frequency and timing, and a carabiner clip I had started seeing before I saw the face. And none of that survives being said out loud to someone who was not inside it with me. I had already heard the response to this kind of thing, from people who loved me and were wrong, and I did not want to hear it again, so I did not say it. I added the Wednesday evening sighting to the note and put my phone face down on the mattress and turned off the light. Weeks 7 and 8, I kept going to work. I kept sitting at the counter seat in the coffee shop. I kept taking the third door of the second car. I had a meeting with Patricia about the review timeline, and she said I was well positioned, and I said thank you and went back to my desk and sat very still for a few minutes, thinking about what it would cost to be visibly wrong about this. To be the woman who disrupted her own performance review window over a pattern of commuter behavior that was, technically, not a crime. I added to the note. On a Saturday in week 8, I went to the library and used one of their public terminals to access the city planning hearing database. I was on the database frequently for work, so this was not unusual behavior. What I was looking for was slightly unusual. The hearing I was looking at had been 4 months earlier, a neighborhood development proposal, 6-story mixed-use, community impact assessment. My presentation had been 3 minutes of pedestrian flow data. Standard. I had done 8 of those presentations in the past year. I go up, I state my name for the record, I present the data, I sit down. I had forgotten about this particular one within a week. I was looking for attendees. The database had a sign-in sheet, digitized, and it listed names and the addresses they had given voluntarily when they signed in. I sorted by approximate proximity to my subway station. 31 names. I was not sure what I was doing exactly. I was doing what I did with any dataset, looking for the pattern. Sorting, filtering, cross-referencing. 31 names who had attended a meeting where I had spoken and who lived within a reasonable radius of my station. 6 searches in, I had his first name from a name tag in the background of a photo posted to a neighborhood association newsletter. Daniel. I had a general residence area. I had a reasonable confirmation that his morning station was 1 stop before mine. I typed the name into LinkedIn. His profile photo was still loading when I recognized him. The image loading in from the top, just the eyes at first, and I already knew. Project manager for a construction logistics firm. Office 2 blocks from mine. Station 1 stop before mine. Had attended the hearing 4 months ago. I had spoken at that hearing. My name was in the public record. It was in the planning database right now, attached to my employer and my professional title, because that is what the public record contains. A man who lives near my station and works near my office takes the same train as me. He attended a public meeting I also attended, a meeting where I spoke and gave my name. He stands in the same spot on the platform every morning. None of that is a crime. None of it even sounds like very much said out loud. All of it together is a pattern I would flag immediately in a traffic study. I gave it a name in my notes. I put his name on it. I closed the browser history. I walked home in the cold and made dinner and watched something on my laptop that I could not describe to you now, and went to bed and lay there with the dark and thought about 3 minutes. I had spoken for 3 minutes about pedestrian flow data at a meeting 40 people attended, and I had gone home and forgotten about it within a week. It was a routine presentation. I was good at it. I had been good at it, and clear, and authoritative, and visible, in the way Patricia had told me I needed to be visible, and I had gone home and not thought about it again. He had not forgotten. I thought about the morning commute, 11 months of feeling the train coming through the floor before I heard it, of knowing my commute with my body the way you know a well-driven road. I had felt, on those mornings, briefly like someone who understood how to read the world. the floor vibrating under my feet, the shift in air pressure, the train arriving exactly where I expected it to arrive. I had been on his train for 8 weeks without knowing it. All those mornings I had been standing on my platform with my coffee and my badge in my hands, unguarded, ordinary, just a person going to work, and I had been seen. Not as a person, as a destination, as a point on a route. He knew my schedule. He had mapped it from one appearance at a public hearing, one searchable name, one employer, and a public record. He had built a pattern around mine, and I had not known I was in it. I sat with this for a while in the library chair. Then I sat with it on the walk home. Then I sat with it at my kitchen table while my dinner got cold. What he knew. My route, my timing, my workplace, the specific platform position I used every morning, the coffee shop 3 blocks from my office. Because if he was on that commercial strip in the evenings, he had likely walked it in the mornings too. And the coffee shop had a window seat that faced the street. What he had witnessed, my ordinary daily life. Me unguarded on a platform. Me walking 4 blocks to work the way you walk 4 blocks to work when you think no one is watching. Distracted, unhurried, myself, what I had given without knowing. 3 minutes of being visibly competent in a public room. My name said clearly for the record, my employer stated, my face turned toward the room with the confidence of someone who knew what she was talking about. I had done nothing wrong. I had done everything I was supposed to do. It was enough anyway. That is the part that stayed. Not the following, not the mapping. That I had been sufficient. That 3 minutes of being good at my job in a public room had been enough. I took a breath. Then I added the LinkedIn information to the note, with a screenshot I had taken on my personal device before closing the browser, and I sent the entire note to my personal email. Subject line, documentation. Then I texted my friend. Her name is Radhika, and she lives 40 minutes away on the B line, and she was the person I had almost called 3 times in the previous 2 weeks and had not called. And I said, I am going to send you something. Read it and keep it. She sent back, okay, you good? I sent, I will explain later. She said, call me tonight? I said, tomorrow. I am fine. I was not fine, but I was not in danger either, and I needed to distinguish between those 2 things clearly before I did anything else. The next morning I went to work. The morning after that I went to work. I added to the note. I started noting not just presence and absence, but platform position, whether he was exactly in his spot or slightly off it, which side of the bag he had the tote strap on, whether the carabiner was clasped toward the platform edge or away. Small things. I was building what I needed to build. Patricia stopped by my desk at the end of week 9 and said the review was looking good and asked if I had anything I needed to discuss. I said no. She looked at me for a moment with the expression she had that I had spent months learning to read. The one that meant she was deciding whether to push further. And then she said, all right, let me know if anything comes up. I said I would. I considered, walking to the station that evening, whether I was going to be right about this, the specific cost of being wrong. I had 19 entries in the note now. I had a LinkedIn screenshot and a name and an employment location, and none of it was a report yet, because none of it was, technically, anything yet. He had ridden the train. He had stood on platforms. If I went to Patricia right now and said I think a man from a public hearing has been tracking my commute, she would look at me with a version of the expression she had just used and she would say, what did he do? And I would say, he rides the train. He stands in the same spot. He was on the commercial block twice in the evenings. And she would say, have you spoken to him? And I would say, no. And she would say, is there a formal record? And I would say, not yet. I knew that conversation by heart without having it. I had rehearsed it in its various versions for 3 weeks. It always ended the same way. I needed him to know that I knew. Or I needed to know, definitively, whether the knowing was reciprocal, whether there was any chance he had not seen me, had not clocked my face as belonging to the platform position he occupied every morning, had not made the connection, whether I had built an explanation for a series of coincidences that were actually coincidences. I was not going to let myself believe that, but I needed to close the door on it before I acted. because if I acted wrong, the cost would be specific and professional, and I had spent 11 months earning back something that had been taken from me, and I was not going to lose it on an unclosed door. Week 10, Thursday. I planned it the night before. I left my apartment 6 minutes early, not 4, 6. I took the stairs down instead of the elevator because the elevator was unpredictable. I walked to the station at a pace that looked normal and felt deliberate, and I was through the turnstile and on the first transfer platform 9 minutes before the train. He was not there yet. I positioned myself near his spot, not in it, to the left of it, about 3 feet, which put me in a position where he would have to look at me when he arrived, or actively look away. I put my phone in my bag, both hands free. I watched the platform entrance. He came through at 8:07, carabiner first, catching the light, then the bag, then the face. He walked to his spot and stopped and looked at the track, and then, in the peripheral adjustment that people make when they enter a space and find someone near where they expected to be alone, he looked to his left. At me. 3 seconds. I held it for 3 seconds and I did not look away. He looked back. 2 seconds, maybe 2.5. Then he looked at the track. The floor started vibrating. Train coming. We boarded the same car. I stood near the door. He was 4 feet away, slightly to my right, facing the opposite door. He did not look at me. He held the overhead bar and looked at the door across from him the entire ride, and I looked at the door on my side, and neither of us moved, and neither of us spoke, and the train went from one station to the next, and the next, and the next. I exited at my stop. He did not. The 4 blocks to my office, the commercial strip, the dry cleaner, the pharmacy, the Thai place I had still not tried. I walked them in the cold morning, and I noticed that I was looking at the windows of the buildings I was passing, using them as a surface to check the reflection of the street behind me, and I thought, you have learned to do this. You have been learning to do this for weeks. You learned it without deciding to learn it, and now you do it automatically. The revolving door of my office building was in its rotation when I arrived. I put my hand on the bar and felt the resistance. It was always slightly too slow, this door, always requiring you to match its pace rather than your own. And normally, this was a minor daily annoyance. That morning, I stood behind it and waited for it to complete its arc and let me through. And I felt, standing there, the specific texture of a decision that had already been made. I went to my desk. I opened the note. 53 entries now, including this morning. I read through from the beginning, which I had only done twice. I added, Week 10 Thursday, T1 platform, direct eye contact, approximately 2.5 seconds. No approach. Boarded same car, did not follow to exit. Then I made 2 copies of the note. I emailed one to my personal account again, time-stamped. I sent one to Radhika with a new message. Read this now, please, all of it. I need you to have it. She called me at lunch. I let it go to voicemail and then listened to the voicemail and then called her back. She said, "This has been happening for weeks." I said, "Yes." She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because telling you meant saying out loud that there is a man who rides the same train as me. That is it. That is the whole thing I could say out loud." There was a silence. She said, "I hear you. I hear what you are not saying." I said, "I know." She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to document it correctly first. Then I am going to act." She said, "I am calling you every day until this is done." She did. Every day. Sometimes just for 4 minutes. She would call while she was walking somewhere, say, "Okay, check in. What is the current status?" And I would tell her, and she would say, "Okay, good. Call me tonight." And I would say, "Okay." It was the one thing I had, those calls. 4 minutes of being inside it with someone who was not going to tell me I was imagining it. She never told me I was imagining it. The building management report took me 2 evenings to write. I am a planner. Writing clear documentation of a pattern is what I do, and I sat at my kitchen table with the note open on one side and the report open on the other, and I was precise and factual and chronological. Name, employer, station, hearing attendance, employment location, commute frequency data, 19 weeks of it, with the methodology, the way I would write any analysis. I am aware of how this sounds. I was aware of how it sounded when I was writing it, that a junior urban planner had formally analyzed the commuting behavior of a man who rode the same train. I am also aware that the formal analysis is what made it legible. You cannot dismiss a table. I sent it to my building management, who had no jurisdiction over subway platforms. I know they had no jurisdiction over subway platforms. The report was not for them. The report was a document that now existed outside my possession, in a system, time-stamped, with my name and his name and 51 data entries and a LinkedIn screenshot. An official record somewhere besides my phone. Then I submitted the full note and the report to the non-emergency police line as an informational submission, not a complaint. I was careful about that language. Informational submission. Pattern of behavior, documented, named, for the record. I received an automated confirmation email at 11:43 p.m. I saved it to a folder I labeled the same thing I had labeled the note, documentation. Then I sat for a while in my kitchen. I thought about the hearing. I have thought about it a lot since then. 3 minutes. I spoke for 3 minutes and said my name clearly, and was good at my job and went home. I did nothing wrong. I have gone through it many times looking for the thing I did wrong, and there is nothing there. I showed up and did the work and was visible in the way I was supposed to be visible, and that was enough. That was sufficient. That is the word that stays with me. Sufficient. I was sufficient to begin something I did not know I had begun. I do not know how to put down the knowledge that being visibly competent in a public room is something that can be used against you. I do not know how you put that down. I have been carrying it since October, and I suspect I will carry it for a long time. It is not a burden I chose. I am being honest about the fact that I have it anyway. The morning after I filed the report, I woke up at 6:20, which is my normal time, and I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window and looked at the street below, which was still mostly dark and mostly empty, the way the city is at 6:20 before it fills up. I got dressed, I took the elevator down instead of the stairs, I walked to the station. On the platform, I stood in my usual spot, to the right of the stairs, and I put my coffee in my left hand and my badge in my right hand, because I always forget to get it out before the scanner. The floor started vibrating. Train coming. I did not look for the carabiner. This was the first morning I made that decision consciously. Every other morning for weeks, I had told myself I was not looking and then looked anyway. Peripheral, automatic, that small flash of silver I had trained myself to find. That morning, I looked at the track and kept looking at the track. The decision cost something. I am not going to tell you it did not. It cost the specific, particular effort of trusting a choice over a reflex, which is harder than it sounds when the reflex has been keeping you oriented for 5 weeks. The train came. I got on through the third door of the second car. The seat I usually stood near was empty, and I stood there anyway, which is what I always do, because it aligns with the exit stairs. The revolving door at my office was mid-rotation when I arrived. I waited for it, matched its pace, went through. I have the note. I have not deleted it. I did not open it that morning, and I have not opened it since. It is in the folder on my phone labeled Expenses, 51 entries, beginning with Tuesday, October 8th, and ending with the morning I made myself look at the track instead of the platform. My performance review was 6 weeks later. Patricia said I was ready. She said the word I had been working toward for 11 months, and we shook hands and I went back to my desk and sat very still for a while. I never found out if he stopped. I decided not to look, and then I kept deciding not to look, day after day, which is harder than one decision and easier than watching for a carabiner every morning for the rest of my life. I do not know if he is still there. I know what is in my documentation folder, and Radhika has a copy of the note, and there is a timestamp submission in a police system with his name and my name and 51 entries. Those things exist. They are outside me now. Whether he is still standing in that spot is a question I have decided to stop answering. I understand that this is not the same thing as it being over. I understand that some things do not close in the way we need them to. I made a decision about what I could carry and what I needed to put down, and I put down the looking. Some mornings, when the floor starts to vibrate and I am waiting for the train to come around the curve, I notice that I am listening. Not for him specifically. For the shift in air pressure, the low tremor in the tiles, the way the sound changes before the train is visible. The same attentiveness I had always had on this commute, that I had before any of this, that I had learned with my body over 11 months of the same 41 minutes. I notice that I have it back. Not unmarked, it is not the same as it was before, but it is mine again. I get on the train.